Disneyland was supposed to be the happiest place on earth for Jenna and her family. It was their first vacation in years, a much-needed break from the monotony of suburban life. Jenna, her husband Mark, and their 2 kids spent the day riding attractions, meeting costumed characters, and indulging in sugary snacks. Everything seemed picture-perfect, but underneath Jenna's smile was a restlessness she couldn't quite shake. It was during their visit to the Ferris wheel that Jenna first noticed him. The man operating the ride, a tall, charming guy with an easy smile and a hint of mischief in his eyes, caught her attention. His name tag read, Adrian. As he helped her onto the gondola with her kids, their eyes met briefly, and she felt a strange flutter in her chest. Later that evening, as they walked back to their hotel, Mark chatted about the day's adventures, but Jenna's thoughts were elsewhere. Adrian's face lingered in her mind. She told herself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment of attraction, but deep down, she knew there was more to it. The next day, Jenna suggested they visit the Ferris wheel again. Mark raised an eyebrow but agreed, chalking it up to her newfound enthusiasm for the ride. When they arrived, Adrian was there, greeting them with the same charming smile. Jenna's heart raced as they boarded the gondola. "Enjoy the ride?" Adrian said, his voice warm. Jenna avoided his gaze, her cheeks flushing. She felt ridiculous for being so affected by a stranger, but there was something magnetic about him that she couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, Jenna found excuses to visit the Ferris wheel whenever she could. Sometimes she brought the kids, other times she went alone, claiming she needed a moment to herself. Each time, Adrian was there, and their interactions grew increasingly flirtatious. "You must really love Ferris wheels," Adrian teased during one visit. "Maybe I just love the view," Jenna replied, her tone playful. Adrian chuckled, his eyes sparkling. "Well, if you ever want a private tour, let me know." The words hung in the air, charged with unspoken possibilities. Jenna's pulse quickened, and she realized she was dangerously close to crossing a line. On their last day at Disneyland, Jenna convinced Mark to take the kids for ice cream while she checked out a souvenir shop. Instead, she made her way to the Ferris wheel, where Adrian was waiting. Her hands trembled as she approached him. "Is that private tour still on the table?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian's smile widened. "Follow me." He led her past the queue and into an empty gondola, locking the door behind them. As the wheel began to turn, Jenna's heart pounded. She knew this was reckless, but she couldn't stop herself. When Adrian leaned in, she didn't resist. Their encounter was brief but intense, a whirlwind of passion and guilt. When the ride ended, Jenna smoothed her clothes and hurried back to her family, her mind racing. She told herself it was a one-time mistake, but she couldn't shake the thrill of what had happened. Back home, life returned to its usual rhythm, but Jenna's thoughts kept drifting back to Adrian. She found excuses to text him, their conversations growing more intimate with each exchange. Before long, she was planning another trip to Disneyland, this time, with the sole purpose of seeing him again. During their next visit, Jenna's secret rendezvous with Adrian became a regular occurrence. Each time, she told Mark she was taking the kids to another attraction or running an errand, but in reality, she was meeting Adrian on the Ferris wheel. The danger only heightened the excitement, and Jenna felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and Jenna's double life was no exception. One afternoon, as Jenna and Adrian shared another stolen moment on the Ferris wheel, Mark and the kids returned to the ride unexpectedly. Mark, scanning the area for his wife, spotted her gondola just as it descended. His stomach dropped as he saw Jenna and Adrian together, their intimacy unmistakable. Mark's world shattered in an instant. He confronted Jenna as she stepped off the ride, his voice trembling with anger. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. Jenna froze, her face pale. "Mark, it's not what it looks like." "Don't lie to me," Mark snapped. "I saw everything." Adrian took a step back, raising his hands defensively. "I think I'll let you two talk," he said, slipping away before Mark could react. Jenna tried to explain, but Mark wasn't listening. He grabbed the kids and stormed out of the park, leaving Jenna to follow in shame. Back at the hotel, Mark confronted Jenna, demanding the truth. She confessed everything, her tears flowing freely. Mark listened in stunned silence, his anger giving way to heartbreak. "I trusted you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How could you do this to us?" Jenna had no answer. She had let her desires consume her, and now she was paying the price. As Mark packed their bags, she realized she had jeopardized everything she held dear. But the fallout was only beginning. The ride back home was silent. Mark refused to look at Jenna, focusing entirely on the road as the kids napped in the back seat. The tension in the car was suffocating, and Jenna's attempts to speak were met with stony silence. When they arrived home, Mark wasted no time. He dropped the bags in the hallway and turned to Jenna. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight," he said curtly. "I need time to think." "Mark, please," Jenna pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Let's talk about this." "Talk?" Mark snapped, his voice rising. "You want to talk after what you've done? I can't even look at you right now." He grabbed an overnight bag and left without another word, leaving Jenna alone in the echoing silence of their home. The next few days were a blur. Mark stayed away, calling only to check on the kids. Jenna tried to go about her routine, but guilt and shame weighed heavily on her. Every time she looked at her children, she felt like a fraud. She had betrayed their trust as much as she had Mark's. Meanwhile, Mark confided in his best friend, Tom. Over beers at a local bar, he poured out his anger and confusion. "I don't understand it," Mark said, his voice breaking. "We had a good life. Why would she throw it all away?" Tom shook his head. "Sometimes people make stupid decisions, Mark. But you need to figure out what you want. Do you want to try to fix this, or are you done?" Mark didn't have an answer. The betrayal cut deep, and the image of Jenna with Adrian haunted him. But part of him still loved her, and that made everything even more complicated. Jenna, desperate to make amends, reached out to a marriage counselor and begged Mark to attend a session. Reluctantly, he agreed, if only for the sake of their children. Their first session was tense. The counselor, a calm and empathetic woman named Dr. Lang, guided them through their emotions. "Mark, can you tell Jenna how her actions have made you feel?" Dr. Lang prompted. Mark took a deep breath. "Betrayed. Humiliated. Like I wasn't enough." Jenna's tears flowed freely. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant to hurt you. I don't even know why I did it. That's something we need to figure out," Dr. Lang said gently. "Affairs often stem from unmet needs or feelings of disconnection. Jenna, can you tell Mark what led to this?" Jenna hesitated, struggling to find the words. "I felt invisible. Like I was just a mom and a wife, and nothing else. Adrian made me feel seen, but it was a mistake. A terrible mistake." Mark's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "I get it. But that doesn't make it okay." As the sessions continued, they began to uncover the cracks in their marriage. Mark realized he had taken Jenna for granted, while Jenna confronted her own insecurities and the choices that had led her down this path. It was a painful process, but it was a start. However, the past refused to stay buried. One evening, Mark received an anonymous text. "You deserve better. Ask Jenna about the last time she saw Adrian." Mark's heart sank. He confronted Jenna immediately, and the ensuing argument shattered the fragile progress they had made. "You're still hiding things from me?" Mark yelled. "No, I swear! I haven't seen him since the trip," Jenna insisted, but the doubt in Mark's eyes was unmistakable. Their marriage was hanging by a thread, and the weight of the truth threatened to snap it entirely. Mark's doubts gnawed at him, and he decided he needed answers. Against his better judgment, he reached out to Adrian directly. After finding his contact information online, Mark sent a terse message. "We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. by the Ferris wheel." Adrian's reply came quickly. "I'll be there." The next morning, Mark arrived at the meeting spot, his emotions simmering just below the surface. Adrian was already there, leaning casually against the Ferris wheel's railing. "Mark," Adrian said, his tone infuriatingly calm. "I wondered if you'd reach out." Mark didn't mince words. "I want the truth. All of it. What happened between you and Jenna?" Adrian shrugged, his nonchalant demeanor stoking Mark's anger. "You already know the basics. But if you're looking for closure, you won't get it from me. Jenna came to me, not the other way around." "Don't try to shift the blame," Mark snapped. "You knew she was married." Adrian smirked. "Maybe. But she didn't seem too concerned about it. If you want someone to blame, maybe you should look at your own marriage." Mark's fists clenched, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You're a coward. You prey on vulnerable people and leave destruction in your wake." Adrian's smirk faded, his expression hardening. "Think what you want. But don't come here expecting me to feel guilty. That's not my problem." Mark stared at him, a mix of disgust and pity churning in his gut. Without another word, he turned and walked away, determined to leave Adrian behind for good. Back home, Mark confronted Jenna again, relaying his conversation with Adrian. Mark's confrontation with Adrian lingered in his mind, fueling his growing determination to resolve the chaos in his life. After leaving the Ferris wheel that morning, he spent hours reflecting on his next steps. He realized that this wasn't just about Adrian or Jenna's betrayal. It was about reclaiming control of his future. That evening, Mark returned home to find Jenna waiting anxiously in the living room. Her face was pale, and her hands fidgeted with the edge of a throw pillow. "Mark," she began softly, "I know you hate me right now, but I need you to hear me out." Mark hesitated before sitting across from her, his arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes." Jenna took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "I've made terrible mistakes. I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to apologize for. But I want to fix this. I want to fix us." Mark's expression hardened. "You think saying sorry is enough? You think we can just move on like nothing happened?" "No," Jenna admitted, tears streaming down her face. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. Just give me a chance to prove I'm still the woman you fell in love with." Mark's jaw tightened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then, with a deep sigh, he replied, "This isn't about falling in love again, Jenna. It's about trust. And right now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again." The weeks that followed were tense. Mark agreed to attend counseling sessions with Jenna, but his reluctance was evident. Their therapist, Dr. Lang, tried to guide them through the complexities of their emotions. "Mark," Dr. Lang asked during one session, "what would it take for you to begin rebuilding trust with Jenna?" Mark stared at the floor for a long moment before answering. "I don't know. I feel like every time I look at her, all I see is what she did. The lies, the betrayal. How do I move past that?" Dr. Lang nodded empathetically. "Healing takes time, and it's not linear. But the fact that you're here shows that part of you wants to try." Jenna reached for Mark's hand, her voice pleading. "I'll wait as long as it takes. I just need you to believe that I'm committed to making this right." Mark hesitated before allowing her hand to rest on his. It was a small gesture, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Adrian's shadow loomed large over their lives. Though Mark had vowed to leave him behind, Adrian seemed intent on stirring trouble. One evening, Jenna received a message from an unknown number. "We're not finished, Jenna. Don't forget what we had." Panic gripped her as she read the words. She deleted the message immediately but couldn't shake the fear that Adrian might try to contact her again. She debated telling Mark but ultimately decided against it, worried it would only make things worse. Adrian's persistence escalated. He began leaving cryptic voicemails and even showed up near Jenna's workplace, his presence a constant reminder of her mistakes. Finally, she decided she couldn't handle it alone. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Jenna approached Mark in the kitchen. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaky. Mark's eyes narrowed. "What now?" She took a deep breath. "Adrian's been trying to contact me. I I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to make things worse, but he's not leaving me alone. Mark's expression darkened. What does he want? I don't know, Jenna admitted. But I'm scared, Mark. I don't know how to make him stop. Mark's anger simmered beneath the surface. You should have told me the moment he reached out. We're dealing with this now. The next day, Mark contacted a lawyer and the authorities, determined to put an end to Adrian's harassment. A restraining order was filed, and security measures were put in place to protect Jenna and the family. Despite these efforts, the stress took a toll on their already fragile relationship. One evening, as they sat in silence on the couch, Jenna spoke up. Do you think we'll ever get through this? Mark's response was measured but honest. I don't know. But I'm willing to try. For the kids, if nothing else. Jenna nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of her choices. She knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but she was determined to do whatever it took to rebuild the trust she had shattered. As the days turned into weeks, small glimmers of hope began to emerge. Mark and Jenna started attending family outings together, their shared love for their children serving as a bridge between them. Slowly, they began to rediscover moments of connection, though the wounds of the past still lingered. Adrian, meanwhile, faded from their lives, his attempts to interfere thwarted by the legal measures Mark had taken. Though his presence had caused immense damage, it also served as a turning point, forcing Mark and Jenna to confront the fractures in their marriage head-on. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in months, Mark and Jenna felt a sliver of hope. They knew there were no guarantees, but they were committed to rebuilding, one step at a time. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new normal for Mark and Jenna. The restraining order against Adrian proved effective, and his interference faded into the background. Still, the scars of the past lingered, and the couple's efforts to rebuild their relationship remained a daily challenge. Jenna poured herself into therapy, not just with Mark but individually as well. She worked to understand the choices that had led her astray and the insecurities that had fueled her actions. Through this process, she uncovered a deeper understanding of herself and the ways in which her marriage had left her feeling invisible. It wasn't just about Adrian, Jenna confessed during one session. It was about feeling alive again, feeling wanted. But I see now that I was looking for validation in all the wrong places. Mark, too, had grown introspective. While his anger and hurt hadn't disappeared, he began to recognize his own role in the breakdown of their marriage. I got complacent, he admitted to Dr. Lang. I thought being a good provider was enough, but I stopped showing her that I valued her. That's on me. Their willingness to confront these truths laid the groundwork for cautious progress. One weekend, Mark surprised Jenna by suggesting they take the kids to the zoo. It was their first family outing since Disneyland, and the gesture wasn't lost on her. As they strolled through the exhibits, snapping photos and sharing laughter, Jenna felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you for this, she said quietly to Mark as the kids ran ahead to the next enclosure. Mark shrugged. We're still a family. That hasn't changed. Jenna smiled, though she knew there was still much to mend. The couple's journey wasn't without setbacks. There were moments when old wounds resurfaced, triggering arguments and doubts. During one particularly heated exchange, Mark's frustration boiled over. How do I know this won't happen again? He demanded. How do I trust you? Jenna's voice cracked as she replied. You don't. Not yet. But I'm doing everything I can to prove to you that I'm worth trusting again. The honesty of her words struck a chord, and while the pain lingered, it also paved the way for further healing. As time passed, Mark and Jenna began to rediscover each other in small but meaningful ways. They started sharing nightly cups of tea, talking about their days and reconnecting over shared memories. Jenna made a point to express her gratitude for Mark's efforts, while Mark worked to show her that she was cherished. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Mark spoke up. Do you ever think about what's next for us? He asked. Jenna hesitated. Every day. I want us to be happy again. I want us to be strong, together. Mark nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I think we can get there. It'll take time, but I want to try. Tears filled Jenna's eyes, and she reached for his hand. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of her hope and determination. Their turning point came during a family vacation, this time to a quiet cabin by the lake. Away from the noise of daily life, they found space to reconnect. They played board games with the kids, cooked meals together, and shared quiet moments by the water. One evening, as they sat by the campfire, Jenna leaned into Mark and whispered, "Thank you for giving us another chance." Mark wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Thank you for fighting for it." By the end of the trip, both Mark and Jenna felt a renewed sense of commitment to their family and each other. They knew their journey wasn't over, but they were finally moving forward together. Years later, as they looked back on the turmoil that had nearly torn them apart, they saw it not just as a time of pain but as a turning point. The choices they made in the aftermath had shaped a stronger, more resilient bond. While the scars of the past remained, they served as reminders of the work it took to rebuild their love. And for Mark and Jenna, that love was worth every step of the journey.